Guess what? Tomorrow we have an exclusive interview with Brian Friedman, my lawyer,
I feel like will haunt him for life. But what do they want at 1? Like, he can't declare what he wants.
Yeah.
What do he want?
Blake Lively said her career was ruined by a secret smear campaign. But what if the real story is that she created the chaos herself? In a shocking twist, the very claims she built her legal battle on just crumbled under oath. And what came next might destroy her credibility for good. Blake Lively wasn't just angry, she was determined to make a statement. After months of swirling rumors, leaked court filings, and cryptic posts, she stepped into the spotlight with one message. They tried to ruin me. And she didn't whisper it. In a headline-making interview with the New York Times, she claimed she had been the target of a calculated smear campaign.
She got her way. Not a surprise here. Hello, my friend. It is Perez, the queen.
One that was supposedly launched by individuals connected to Wayfair, the very people she was now dragging into court. According to her, the attacks were deliberate, vicious, and timed to inflict maximum damage. Just as her film career was regaining momentum and a new project was set to premiere, the digital floodgates opened. Negative coverage, shady rumors, social media whispers, content creators with eerily similar talking points. Blake insisted none of it was a coincidence. In her words, it was a takedown. She framed herself as the target of a covert digital assault, engineered to make her look unstable.
When I did the thing, it was intended to force Wayfair to address
unreliable and ultimately unhireable, and it worked, at least publicly. Headlines picked it up, TikTok sleuths latched on, Twitter threads spun out of control. To many, she wasn't just an actress anymore. She was a woman silenced by the system, battling a hidden machine built to destroy reputations. The framing was compelling. She wasn't just suing out of spite. She was standing up for herself, reclaiming her voice, taking on the giants who, she claimed, were punishing her for speaking out about toxic environments, broken promises, and misconduct behind closed doors. Her legal complaint didn't hold back either.
Give you some high-level potential reasons why there's no amended complaint.
It outlined how this smear campaign allegedly seeped into every corner of her professional life, costing her roles, straining her reputation, and creating what she described as an unlivable professional atmosphere. And the supposed culprit? Wayfair, or more precisely, certain executives and legal figures tied to the company. Her team wasn't subtle. They accused Wayfair's attorney, Brian Friedman, of being more than just a legal shield. According to them, he was a key player in spreading misinformation, feeding negative stories to media outlets and online creators, and stoking the flames behind the scenes. But here's where it gets interesting.
Looks like Blake's gotta hand over the Taylor Swift text messages. So she moved.
Because while Blake's story was gaining sympathy from the public, the courtroom was a different battlefield. Emotion and optics can win the media war, but they don't hold much weight under oath. The court wanted something far less dramatic and far more specific. Proof. They didn't want vague theories or emotionally charged statements. They wanted timelines, receipts, concrete evidence, anything that showed there was an actual campaign and not just backlash or consequence. And when Blake was finally placed under oath in a deposition, everything began to unravel. Because for all the headlines, the social media outrage, and the forceful claims made through public interviews,
Blake Lively keeps asking for sanctions. Let's take a look. I have not read through these, but I see the word sanction.
She couldn't back it up. No digital army, no paper trail, no proof of an organized hit job. Just a story starting to fall apart. And what she said in that deposition might be the biggest mistake of her entire career. It was the moment her entire narrative was supposed to be cemented. But instead, under oath, Blake Lively delivered the one thing no one saw coming: doubt. During her recent deposition, sworn testimony where every word can make or break a case, Blake was directly questioned about the so-called ongoing smear campaign she had been shouting about for months. The pressure was on. All eyes were waiting for her to deliver the smoking gun.
Okay, I need you all to see this. Blake Lively's old blog, Preserve.
The texts, the emails, the hidden network of online saboteurs she had so passionately described in interviews. But when it came time to present that evidence, she didn't have it. In fact, when asked to describe what she personally knew about this ongoing campaign, she admitted that she had very little direct knowledge at all. What she did have was vague, circumstantial, emotionally loaded, but legally hollow. It wasn't a coordinated attack. It wasn't backed by digital footprints or insider leaks. And it certainly wasn't what her legal team had implied so confidently in their filings.
Okay, today has been absolutely insane, but while I was going live on my show today, over on YouTube,
that single moment, one quiet admission in a room full of lawyers, sent shockwaves through the entire case. Because if she couldn't prove the smear campaign, then what exactly had all of this been about? And just like that, the foundation of her lawsuit began to crack. What started as a bold claim backed by fiery rhetoric was now looking more like speculation, and her legal team scrambled to shift the narrative. Instead of continuing to hammer the smear campaign angle, they pivoted. Suddenly, the target wasn't just Wayfair or its executives. It was their attorney, Brian Friedman. They alleged that he had defamed her, that he was the real source of retaliation.
Real victim. The real victim is Justin and the others, and it's because they've been wrongfully accused. And
acting less like a lawyer and more like a PR hitman. This pivot wasn't subtle, it was desperate. With the original accusation collapsing under the weight of its own vagueness, Blake's legal team had to find a new villain, and fast. So they aimed their fire at Friedman, demanding his bank records, his phone logs, even his communications with content creators. Not just to gather facts, but to paint him as the mastermind behind a supposed media blitz. It was a dramatic move and one that immediately raised red flags in the legal world. Because going after opposing counsel isn't just rare. It's seen as borderline reckless.
Absurd. You and I both know that public figures, many of whom you've defended, including yours truly, have to take.
And if this was her new strategy, she might have just crossed a line she can't walk back from. Blake Lively's pivot from smear campaign victim to defamation plaintiff wasn't just a change in strategy, it was a full-blown legal ambush. And the way she went about it left even seasoned attorneys stunned. Instead of sticking to the facts of her own experience, she zeroed in on Wayfair's legal counsel, Brian Friedman, the very man hired to defend the company against her allegations. In a rare and aggressive move, Blake's team tried to drag him into the case not just as a lawyer, but as a fact witness. That's a big deal. Because in legal circles, turning an opposing attorney into a target is seen as a nuclear option.
Principles of press freedom and journalistic integrity that outlets such as TMZ relied upon in their own coverage of the
something you only do when you're out of real ammunition. They demanded access to his personal bank records, telephone communications, and even private interactions with journalists and content creators, claiming that Friedman wasn't acting as a lawyer, but as a public relations arm, orchestrating reputational attacks on Blake. Their argument? If he was speaking to the press or pushing back on her narrative publicly, then he wasn't functioning as legal counsel. He was allegedly spreading defamation. But here's the problem: attorneys are allowed to defend their clients, especially when those clients are being called abusers, manipulators, or worse in the media.
One thing that is driving me insane about the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni case is that no one is interrogating where they are getting their anti-Blake information.
So, what was really going on? Legal experts online were quick to call it out. Blake's move wasn't about justice. It was about intimidation. This wasn't a strategy designed to win on evidence. It was a pressure campaign designed to silence and punish the people daring to push back against her story. And in doing so, she broke one of the unspoken rules of legal warfare. Don't make it personal with opposing counsel, because if you do, you invite the same treatment in return. Attorneys across social media labeled her tactic underhanded, desperate, even dangerous. Because if this became standard practice, turning lawyers into personal enemies,
the fatal flaw in Blake Lively's case against Justin Baldoni and Wayfair was just discovered,
litigation would become a battleground of character assassinations, not truth. And the court wasn't blind to it either. Kevin Fritz, Friedman's legal ally, fired back hard, accusing Blake of using subpoenas as a weapon, not a tool. He pointed out that she wasn't pursuing legitimate evidence. She was trying to turn her opponent's legal defense into an act of retaliation. But here's where it gets worse. Blake's entire new claim hinged on one assumption, that Friedman's public comments about the case somehow disqualified him from legal protections. Except they didn't. What Blake may not have counted on was that litigation privilege protects lawyers too, meaning Friedman's public statements, as long as they relate to an ongoing case.
It looks like we have a little update here. Remember how Blake Lively was trying to have the court compel the Wayfair parties to produce all
are absolutely shielded from defamation claims. So by trying to destroy him in court, she not only crossed a dangerous ethical line, she did it on a legal foundation made of sand. Blake Lively may have expected her subpoenas to be met with silence or hesitation. What she got instead was the legal equivalent of a spotlight turned back on her, with the volume turned all the way up. Enter Kevin Fritz, co-counsel to Wayfair's attorney Brian Friedman. If Blake's team thought Friedman would quietly back away from the defamation claim, they miscalculated. Badly. Fritz's response was not just a legal rebuttal, it was a direct and pointed counterattack.
You are about to file a lawsuit against Blake's publicist, Leslie Sloan,
aimed not only at dismissing the claims, but at exposing the tactics behind them. In a sharply written letter to the court, Fritz accused Blake of launching a campaign of her own, a legal one wrapped in intimidation, aimed at silencing dissent. And he didn't hold back. He argued that Blake's subpoena wasn't just a stretch, it was a deliberate misuse of legal process, designed to punish Friedman for simply doing his job. The request to access his bank records, call logs, and communications with third parties was framed as necessary to prove defamation. But Fritz saw right through it. He called it what it was, a harassment tactic.
Things continue to blow up for Blake Lively. So yesterday, she and her attorney, Michael Gottlieb, were accused of witness tampering.
According to Fritz, Blake wasn't trying to uncover hidden truths. She was trying to make an example out of Friedman, to scare others from speaking out or defending Wayfair's side of the story. And more importantly, he claimed this was just another step in a larger pattern, a shifting narrative that kept changing every time her original claims started to fall apart. Think about it. First, she said there was a smear campaign. Then, when asked to prove it, she backtracked. Next, she pivoted to retaliation. Then, when that started to collapse under legal scrutiny, she shifted again, this time to defamation. But now, even that was starting to crumble.
Her castle of caca is crumbling.
Fritz pointed out something critical. Friedman's comments were made in the context of litigation, statements about the case made publicly to defend his client. And under New York law, those statements are covered by something powerful and absolute: litigation privilege. This doctrine protects anyone participating in a legal proceeding, plaintiffs, defendants, witnesses, even lawyers, from defamation claims when the statements in question are related to the case. It doesn't matter if they're made in court or to the media. As long as they're pertinent to the proceedings, they're untouchable. In other words, even if everything Blake claimed about Friedman's statements was true, it wouldn't matter.
Baldoni's lawyer has spoken up and saying he is suing the PR firm and Blake Lively for those leaked text messages.
Legally, he had every right to say them. Fritz made sure the court understood this. He brought receipts, case law, and prior rulings, including one from the same judge overseeing this matter, to demonstrate that Blake's claim wasn't just weak, it was doomed. But that wasn't all, and he also accused Blake of trying to manipulate the public conversation by sending Friedman a cease and desist letter, demanding he stop making public statements. Think about the irony here. Blake had taken her side of the story to the New York Times, blasted her claims across social media, and made sweeping allegations on public platforms. But when the other side dared to respond, suddenly it was defamation.
Brian Friedman slams Blake Lively's motion to dismiss, and he says that she is abusing the legal system.
Fritz painted that move as a calculated effort to control the narrative, a way to shame the opposition into silence while Blake's team dominated headlines. In effect, she wanted a one-way war. She could throw punches, but any attempt to block or respond would be labeled retaliation. And for Friedman, this wasn't just about defending himself, it was about drawing a line in the sand. Because if Blake's tactics succeeded, any public legal defense could be weaponized as harassment. That wouldn't just chill speech, it would collapse it. It would mean lawyers could no longer speak up for their clients without risking personal liability. It would turn the legal system into a gag order factory.
I was on Twitter and I saw Brian Friedman's response to Blake Lively's TMZ article. I'm just gonna
controlled by whoever filed first. Fritz made that danger clear and the court was listening. The implication was damning. Blake wasn't being silenced, she was trying to silence others. And the more she tried to control the conversation through legal threats, the more obvious it became that this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about power, control, and fear. Because if her case was truly built on solid ground, why did she need to intimidate the opposition into staying quiet? The truth was becoming harder and harder to suppress. And Friedman wasn't just refusing to be quiet, he was about to expose something even more devastating about Blake's legal strategy.
First, Blake steals Justin Baldoni's movie, and now she is stealing Brian Friedman's lines. And literally,
if Blake Lively's legal strategy was built like a house, litigation privilege was the wrecking ball, and she didn't see it coming. By the time her legal team pivoted to accuse Brian Friedman of defamation, they were already on shaky ground. But they didn't just trip up on the facts. They ran headfirst into a law that completely disarms the very weapon they were trying to use. It's called litigation privilege, and it's one of the strongest legal shields in existence. Under New York law, it protects any statement made in relation to a legal case, whether in court, in filings, or even in interviews with the press, as long as it's connected to the ongoing proceedings. This privilege doesn't just apply to lawyers.
Blake Lively's team tried to strong-arm Taylor Swift into supporting her. According to Justin Baldoni's attorney, that happens to be true.
It protects everyone involved in the case. Plaintiffs, defendants, witnesses, even the attorneys on both sides. And here's the kicker. It doesn't matter if the statements are blunt, critical, or even aggressive. If they relate to the case, they're immune from defamation claims. The same law that protected Blake when she made explosive claims against Wayfair in her lawsuit now applied to them and their defense team. The same shield she used to fire the first shot was now protecting the people she was trying to accuse of firing back. In short, you can't sue someone for defamation if they're simply responding to your lawsuit. Friedman was doing exactly that.
You guys, I just watched Little Girl Attorney's explanation video, and when I say...
He was defending his clients in public, addressing the claims Blake had made publicly herself. And under the law, he had every right to do it. Blake's legal team tried to argue that Friedman's comments to the media made him more of a PR figure than a practicing attorney. But that argument fell apart quickly. Defending a client in the court of public opinion isn't unusual. It's expected when the case is already playing out in headlines. And remember, Blake herself took her story to the New York Times, using the media to frame herself as the wronged party. She can't have it both ways. She put the story into the public arena, then tried to muzzle anyone who disagreed. And legally, that's where it all unraveled.
I'm shocked that we didn't get more of a reaction from Swifties today. Literally,
Kevin Fritz spelled it out for the court in brutal detail. Not only was Blake's defamation claim legally hollow, but the subpoena demanding Friedman's private communications was completely unnecessary. Blake already knew the statements she was upset about. She'd even linked to them herself in court filings. She wasn't looking for unknown evidence. She was looking to punish, to dig, to intimidate. But courts don't play those games. The court saw through the noise. The privilege was clear. And now Blake's entire shift to defamation wasn't just flawed, it was dead on arrival. The irony was almost poetic. She had filed lawsuits under the protection of litigation privilege.
Brian Friedman is putting Blake Lively on notice. We finally hear from Brian Friedman after the judge's ruling.
She had made public accusations with confidence, knowing she was shielded. But the moment someone else used that same right against her, she tried to flip the rules and failed. Because the same law she used to attack was now being used to defend. And there's no legal workaround for that. It was the fatal flaw in her strategy, one that couldn't be undone. When the legal arguments started slipping through her fingers, Blake Lively didn't slow down. She doubled down. With the smear campaign narrative falling apart and her defamation claim on life support, she launched a new offensive. But this time, it wasn't aimed at Wayfair. It wasn't even just about Friedman.
Hell yes. Judge Lyman's making some calls early this morning, and Lauren at Court of Random Opinion.
It was aimed at everyone talking about the case. Over 100 subpoenas, not to executives, not to employees, but to content creators, independent journalists, and online commentators, people who had dared to discuss her case publicly, even if they weren't directly involved. The message was clear. Speak about me and I'll drag you into court. These weren't casual inquiries. These were full legal demands. Commands for personal data, private communications, and internal records. For many of these creators, they hadn't said anything defamatory. Some had simply read publicly available court filings. Others offered mild commentary or asked basic questions.
Are you saying that they got changed copies of the community?
That was all it took. It didn't matter if you had 5,000 subscribers or 500,000. If your video didn't paint Blake as the clear victim, you became a target. She wasn't just trying to win in court anymore. She was trying to win through fear. It was an intimidation campaign dressed up as discovery. And legal experts took notice. The subpoenas weren't narrowly focused or well justified. They were sweeping, excessive, and chilling. Critics began calling it out for what it was, a form of legal bullying designed to exhaust Blake's critics into silence. Because think about it, most independent creators don't have legal teams on retainer. They don't have the money to fight subpoenas, even if they've done nothing wrong.
Now I want to talk about Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Blake is suing Justin and other companies and people involved in making of the film.
When a celebrity-backed legal team drops paperwork on your doorstep, the cost isn't just financial, it's emotional, reputational, and deeply personal. It didn't feel like justice, it felt like a warning. And that's where the real damage started. Blake's public image was built on standing up for victims, speaking truth to power, being the one who wouldn't be silenced. But now, she was the one trying to silence others. She'd accused Wayfair of retaliation, but the irony was glaring. Her subpoenas looked a lot like retaliation themselves. Content creators were being threatened with legal consequences not because they lied, but because they didn't tell her version of the story. And if that sounds extreme, it is.
After Blake made it clear that she did not want Brian Friedman taking her deposition, I just really love that Brian...
Because this wasn't just about controlling a courtroom, it was about controlling the narrative. And every time someone pushed back or poked holes in her story, her response wasn't to clarify or refute, it was to threaten. That's not accountability, that's control. And what makes it worse is that this tactic nearly worked. Some creators took down videos, others stopped covering the story altogether. Even now, many are afraid to speak, not because they're wrong, but because they can't afford to be right. But the tide was beginning to turn. The aggressive tactics, the shifting narratives, the weaponization of subpoenas, it all pointed to one uncomfortable truth. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore.
I wondered to myself, Brian, whether Justin's already won that victory and whether, as a result, he's interested.
This was a campaign to erase the other side of the story. And the court was starting to notice. For months, Blake Lively had controlled the spotlight, narrating her version of events, framing herself as the one being hunted. But behind the scenes, that narrative was quietly collapsing. And when the court began peeling back the layers, the truth that emerged wasn't just inconvenient, it was devastating. In their latest filings, Wayfair's legal team didn't just poke holes in her claims, they pulled the entire structure down. Kevin Fritz laid it out plainly. Blake knew exactly which statements she claimed were defamatory. She knew who said them, where they were published, and when they appeared.
The judge has just officially thrown Justin Baldoni's entire lawsuit in the garbage, and if you can hear fire trucks in the background.
She even provided links in her own court documents. So why the massive subpoena to Friedman's firm? Why the scramble for phone logs and private communications? According to Fritz, the answer was simple. Blake wasn't looking for new evidence. She was trying to manufacture it. Because if she had everything she needed, then the subpoena wasn't about discovery. It was about leverage. Even the judge took notice. During a recent hearing, the court asked Blake's lawyers a direct and simple question. If your client already knows the statements in question, what exactly are you looking for in this subpoena? They had no good answer because there wasn't one.
We have another crew member that's speaking out against Blake Lively, claiming she took advantage of Justin Baldoni.
Blake had thrown everything into a legal battle based on emotional impact, but the facts refused to line up. She claimed retaliation, but the countersuit filed against her by Wayfair. The court ruled it had a reasonable basis in fact and law. That's not retaliation, that's a legal response. She claimed defamation, but the statements made in the press, protected by litigation privilege. Piece by piece, the court was untangling the threads, and what was left behind wasn't evidence of a smear campaign. It was a pattern of narrative control, distraction, and escalation. And the worst part, she may have known it all along, because once her original smear campaign allegations fell apart under deposition.
Is Baldoni going to have a career after this? After this is all done, what happens to Baldoni's career? Do you think this hurts him?
She didn't withdraw them. She shifted the blame. First to retaliation, then to Friedman, then to creators. Each pivot more desperate than the last. But there's only so far a legal shell game can go. And in this case, it appears she ran out of places to hide. At this point, even her own filings seemed to work against her. The court documents she submitted trying to justify the subpoenas only confirmed one thing. She already had the information she claimed to be seeking, meaning her continued pressure campaign against opposing counsel and third parties wasn't based in legal necessity. It was personal.
Okay, so I literally don't care what you're doing right now. If you're driving, pull over. If you're at a funeral, go home. Because I have some earth-shattering
And courts don't like that, especially when a plaintiff uses the legal system not to pursue truth, but to punish dissent. So now the narrative was flipping. Blake wasn't the hunted anymore, she was the one doing the hunting. And with every filing, every motion, and every failed accusation, the court and the public began to see the pattern. The truth wasn't being uncovered through her claims. It was being exposed through her tactics. In the beginning, Blake Lively looked like a woman fighting back, the interviews, the headlines, the legal filings that framed her as the target of something dark and calculated. She had positioned herself as the voice of resistance, one woman going up against a powerful machine that wanted to silence her.
Things continue to blow up for Blake Lively. So yesterday, she and her attorney, Michael Gottlieb, were accused of witness tampering and—
But now, that story is unraveling fast. And what's being left behind isn't the picture of a wronged starlet. It's the outline of a much different truth. What began as a smear campaign allegation has slowly publicly transformed into something far messier. A chain of shifting accusations, failed legal maneuvers, and tactics that look more like control than courage. She claimed to be retaliated against. She wasn't. She claimed she was defamed. She wasn't. She claimed a secret campaign had been launched to ruin her. Under oath, she admitted there was no proof. And with each legal pivot, her credibility took a hit. But maybe the most damaging part of it all wasn't what happened in the courtroom. It's what happened outside of it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that evil has once again prevailed because a federal judge has just officially thrown
Blake's attempt to weaponize the legal system against content creators and journalists, people with no ties to Wayfair, no insider knowledge, just opinions, exposed a chilling truth. She didn't just want to win her case. She wanted to own the narrative. And when she couldn't do that through headlines, she tried to do it through subpoenas. And it backfired badly. Now, the public perception she fought so hard to control is slipping through her fingers. Her name is still trending, but not for the reasons she hoped. The court of public opinion is now asking different questions. What if she was never the victim? What if the campaign she feared was never real? What if this entire war was built on a story she couldn't defend?
Hey everybody, I think Justin Baldoni's lawyer Brian Friedman actually just delivered his worst statement to this point regarding the Blake Lively.
Once the facts came to light, Blake Lively set out to clear her name. But in trying to silence her critics, she may have done more damage to her reputation than any rumor ever could. The lawsuits will play out, the motions will be heard, the transcripts may or may not be unsealed. But one thing is certain. The woman who once controlled the narrative has now lost control of the story. In the end, this isn't just a story about lawsuits or legal privilege. It's about what happens when someone tries to weaponize sympathy, spin public outrage, and control the conversation, only to have that strategy collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. Blake Lively didn't just take her case to court, she took it to the press, to content creators, and to anyone who would listen. But when the facts didn't match the narrative, her story started shifting. And now, the more she pushes, the more obvious it becomes. This wasn't just about clearing her name, it was about silencing everyone else's. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. And when the dust finally settles, this case may not be remembered for the scandal she claimed to uncover, but for the one she exposed by trying to hide it.